Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for this week's edition of Inside the Zone. Justin Kinney of Optimum Performance Sports joining us via Zoom. And Justin, man, we've got 6 teams alive, ready to play for a regional championship this weekend. What are you most looking forward to about this coming Friday? Because I think we have a good cross-section of teams that we thought would be here and a good cross-section of teams that are nice surprises when it comes to advancing thus far in the playoffs.
I think what the most exciting thing is, Glenn, and when we look at it, other than the matchup with Bluffton and Bishop Luers, you can make a case for all of our teams to win this week. It'd be shocking if that happens, but there's no matchup coming up on Friday where you look at and go, oh, that's it. This is the end of the road. And so that's kind of exciting because we're starting to get close enough with 2 weeks away from the state championship weekend. We were like, all right, this team could potentially make it. And you look at the matchups this week and nobody stands out as saying, well, it's over for them on Friday.
Yeah, I think that's part of the excitement is there are a lot of 50-50 games out there when it comes to teams from our area. Let's start off in 6A with Carroll at Lafayette Jeff. Carroll obviously won at Penn a couple of weeks ago and then used a big second half to propel themselves over Warsaw. We thought this was going to be a trip to Crown Point. I think most of us have that penciled in. So obviously Lafayette Jeff, the Broncos are no pushover if you beat Crown Point by 10 and are now hosting in the regionals. How do you see this one playing out, knowing that the Broncos are coming off their first sectional title in 20 years? So this is relatively new territory for the program.
It's an upstart team with Lafayette Jeff, and being able to take care of previously undefeated Crown Point was impressive. But looking at Carroll and what they've been able to do over the course of the season, and an impressive performance out of them against Warsaw. And Warsaw did what it wanted to do. It wanted to control the game with its running game and really limit possessions. And other than that first 3 and out for Carroll, they were able to score on every possession. So that was the key to get that win. And when you look at Lafayette Jeff, they score a lot of points. And we saw that even last week at Crown Point, dropping 38 on Crown Point. But they also are susceptible to giving up points as well. So I think it's a good matchup for Carroll. I think that defense is good enough for the Chargers to get enough stops in this one to give them a shot to win. But you go on the road in the regional round of the playoffs, you never know what to expect, and this will be a tough assignment for Carroll.
When you look at Lafayette, Jeff, I mean, I kind of went through their stats of their last game. It didn't look like they did anything particularly well. They just did everything pretty good. You know, their offense, they threw a couple touchdowns. They ran it pretty well. They were opportunistic on defense. They held Crown Point to 28. I believe they had a turnover for a touchdown. So you're talking about they're very good in all facets. There aren't a lot of holes. Is that a good thing for Carroll? Where this is not a team where you say, well, let's take away the run and we're okay.
Right.
They can't stop anybody, so we're just going to outscore them. It's a case of where they're solid in really all 3 facets of the game, which is kind of what Carroll is as well.
You bring up a great point with Carroll because as short as 2 years ago when this team went 7-3, we were saying, man, if they only had a running game to complement their passing attack, right? And you look at Nate Starks, 175 yards on Friday night, and he goes over 1,000 yards for the season. And Braden Steely has been a good running back for them. Jimmy Sullivan has taken off when need be. But this is a very balanced offense for Carroll, running the ball, passing the ball, and it's difficult to prepare for because you don't have that one aspect of the game you can prioritize. And so if we're Lafayette Jeff preparing for Carroll, it's the same thing for them as Carroll preparing for Lafayette Jeff. You really can't focus on just one aspect of the game.
Let's talk about Snyder at Mishawaka. Snyder, again, showing the intestinal fortitude to survive. Northside, you're talking about a Northside team that led by 9 points in the third quarter. Snyder's showing the heart of a champion to come back and win that one with a touchdown pass to Lincoln Firks with little less than 3 minutes to go. So now they head to Mishawaka. This is a really good Mishawaka football team. This is going to be a challenge for Snyder. How do you see this one playing out?
It always seems to be tough with Mishawaka. It's one of those teams that is not overly dynamic and doesn't shock you when you play them, but they're very methodical in what they do. Running the ball, they like to go 3, 4, 5 yards of play, and it's nothing insane. But then you look up at the scoreboard, and they've eaten up 8 minutes off the clock, and they've scored a touchdown on you. So For Snyder to go on the road and get this win now, after the excitement of beating Northside in thrilling fashion, they need to regroup. And when you look at this matchup, that defensive front for Snyder, I felt like they got pushed off the ball a fair amount of times on Friday night by that big Northside offensive line, and Jonte Lambert once again ran roughshod over Snyder. But for the Panthers, you have to like too what you saw from Kamari Juarez and the offense as well. So if you can get some stops defensively, put the cavemen in some positions they don't want to be in offensively, I think this is a game that Snyder can win. It's 1-0. I mean, you said it at the jump, a lot of 50-50 type games this week, and this is another one.
Yeah, you alluded to something I wanted to touch on. Jonte Lambert's obviously, he had a special season, but Northside ran for 319 yards against that Snyder defense. That is something, Mishawaka historically, a team that loves to pound the football, that doesn't bode well this week. You know Kurt Tippmann and that defensive staff is going to be geared to stop the run and improve that run defense. How do you do that this week and make sure that's a point of emphasis to make Mishawaka throw the football on Friday night?
Well, I think it's very much getting back to the basics of looking at what you did or didn't do last week and playing better. It's not a hulking Snyder defensive line, but it's a very quick and athletic defensive line. And if they can get off the blocks and make plays, that'll be the key in this one. I don't think they necessarily did that against Northside, and it cost them for most of that game. And the offense was able to make plays and special teams as well. But I think for Snyder to win this game at Mishawaka, that defensive front needs to play much, much better than it did a week ago.
In 4A, you got Kokomo at Columbia City, man. Apparently, you can never count Columbia City out. Like, when the chips are down, these guys have answered the bell every week. How do you see this one playing out? Because Kokomo comes in with that double wing offense that Austin Colby runs, that his dad ran while he was at Kokomo. That's just been very effective and is difficult. It's like playing Navy or Army in a certain week. You don't face it all season long, and then when you have to face it, it's something different. So it certainly presents a challenge, and we saw what Kokomo can do in week one. They beat a pretty good Leo team soundly with a good second half in week one. How do you see this one playing out, knowing that Kokomo does bring in a unique offense and one that's really been effective thus far this season?
Well, they come from a notoriously weak football conference, but they did go to Lafayette Jeff, a team that plays Carroll this week, and only lose by 2 in week 9. So that was their lone loss of the season for Kokomo. And of course, they beat Leo in week 1, which seems like forever ago. But by and large, when you look at Kokomo and you're trying to find some deficiencies in them, I just don't know if they've been tested as much as Columbia City has. Mm-hmm. And so for me, with Kokomo going on the road to Columbia City and facing a competent opponent like they had to do with Lafayette Jeff and fell short, I think there's some opportunity here for Columbia City, but it is a very dangerous offense. That Columbia City defense has been so good throughout the course of the season, needs to continue that play. And I think big plays are the key in this one. Look, at Stratton Fuller made those big plays, the block of the field goal, that big fourth down stop in overtime. And I think those are the plays that Columbia City is going to need to continue to make against Kokomo. I like Columbia City at home in this one, but far from easy taking on the Wildcats.
What's the key to the special sauce that Columbia City has this year? Because you see the Brett Fox interviews afterwards. You love the love that he has for his program and just dynamic stuff. And it's a special group of guys to be around, is what he always continues to preach. But like they've had so many tight games. Norwell, Wayne, last week against Leo, that they've been able to pull out in the end. What does that say about this program, and how have they been able to do that?
It's resiliency and not making mistakes and putting yourself in position to succeed. So Columbia City, you could say it's a bit of luck, bit of skill, bit of preparation, a little bit of everything, but they've not shot themselves in the foot very often late in games when the game's on the balance. And you look at Snyder on Friday, they struggled in the first half. Turnovers, missed kicks, and people say, well, Snyder's not going to beat themselves. Well, they did the best possible job they could through the first 2+ quarters of that game on Friday. But toward the end of the game, it was Northside making the mistakes, and it was Snyder capitalizing. So I think we're seeing that from Columbia City too. When the game is on the line, when they need to make plays, they're making plays and not making mistakes. And that's why Columbia City is where they're at right now. And they have a good shot of capturing a regional championship if they play well on Friday.
Yeah, Columbia City winning their first sectional championship since, I believe, 1993. Let's go to 2A, where Bluffton won their first sectional championship since 1988, beating Eastbrook after being down 21-7 to Eastbrook. They come back and win 42-35. Bluffton at Bishop Luers is going to be our highlight zone game of the week. You're talking this week. And where do you see this matchup going? Because you're talking about a Bluffton team that is riding high, but has flown under the radar for the majority of the season. When we talk about ACAC, it starts with the Jets, the Starfires, and then Heritage had a good season. We didn't talk a whole lot about the Bluffton Tigers during the regular season.
I know.
But what are they doing here? Because every time Anthony Cruz seems to run the football, every time I check, he's got over 200 yards on a Friday night.
I think that's the secret. If Anthony Cruz can go over 200 yards rushing, then you're in good shape. And in order to beat Eastbrook, you have to win the battles up front. You don't have to win every battle, but enough to be there at the end. And that's what Eastbrook was able to do. And they gave up a lot of yards for sure, but they also gained a lot of yards over Eastbrook. And I think being at home helped tremendously with that. And kudos to Bluffton, first time since 1998 getting a sectional, or excuse me, was it 98 or 88?
88.
88.
88.
Man.
Yeah. It's been a while.
88 since Bluffton last got a sectional championship.
Were you alive in 88?
For them now, I was 6 years old.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I
was around, yeah. So
remember celebrating.
For Bluffton, you're playing with house money now, right? I mean, you're preparing for a big game on Friday, but you've excelled and succeeded and gotten something not a lot of people thought you could get. So in my opinion, Bluffton maybe is the looser team in this matchup. Maybe Luers feeling a bit of the pressure a little bit more. And so for me, I think Bluffton comes in there with nothing to lose and see if they can make some plays and create some mistakes and turnovers. And who knows, maybe they can knock off Luers on their home field.
If you're Luers, how do you what's your approach going into this game? Because, okay, you got over the hump. You beat the Blazers last week. I don't think I'm not taking away anything from Luers, but the Carson Jacobs injury loomed very large in that game. 35-21 at Butler. But Nick Thompson returns the opening. We were talking about Nick Thompson a bunch last week. Oh, maybe they'll lit him up. He returns the opening kick for a touchdown. He's the best guy, the best player on the football field. How do you make sure that momentum continues to roll? Because we talked about earlier in the postseason, Charlie Stansky a little bit dinged up. He has looked really pretty good throughout the course of the playoffs. So if you're Bishop Luers, what's the mentality? What's the focus this week heading into a game against Bluffton that a lot of people are going to pick you to win?
Yeah, the key thing here is get the ball in the hands of your skill position players and don't let Bluffton hang around. I think if you can come out and get up a couple scores early and really deflate the Bluffton Tigers, then you have a great shot. And that really sets the tone for the game. And in the trenches, you could say it's a wash a little bit. Maybe Bluffton has the edge, but on the outside of the skill position player spots, this is going to be Luers' game. And they just need to take advantage of that. Limit the turnovers, limit the mistakes, attack, and they should be in good shape. But I completely agree with you about Friday night. If Carson Jacobs is in the lineup, we may be talking about Eastside versus Bluffton here instead of Luers.
Let's go to 1A. Carroll Flora at Adams Central. Adams Central has been a juggernaut throughout the postseason thus far. Carroll Flora coming off a really big win over what was a solid, at least record-wise, West Central team. So you're talking about an Adams Central team that will go in favored. My only issue, or the biggest concern that I have, is Carroll Flora's got a fullback named Keegan Ellis, who's 6'4", 220 pounds, who rushed for over 200 yards and 6 touchdowns last week. No matter what level you play on 6'4", 220 pound running backs play. So, and help control the clock. So how do you see this one playing out, knowing that this will be the best test that Adams Central has had to date in the postseason?
It will be. I just don't know if that's enough for us to look at this game as a competitive football game for Adams Central. What I would love to see between now and the championship game over Thanksgiving weekend is Adams Central playing a team that's going to challenge them like Lutheran will, vertically. The sophomore quarterback that's thrown for 3,100 yards and 41 touchdowns. And that's the matchup I'm looking at. I know that Michael Mosier is saying the right things. We're only focused on Carroll, but he also needs to start challenging his team and see some things and do some things that they're going to need to do in a couple weeks if they advance. I don't feel like a week is long enough time to prepare for that Lutheran team and how good it is. So I'm starting to sprinkle in some ideas and schemes and stuff like that that will help you against Lutheran in a couple weeks because they're tremendous. And for in the rematch, you're going to think Adams Central is going to have to play better than they did last year to have a chance to win that game. So go in, take care of business against Carroll. But to me, maybe you're playing the starters all the way through. When, I mean, if you get up 35, maybe you have to keep playing them because they need to get used to playing 4 quarters. And even next week in the semi-state, if it's a blowout. So I think it would help Adams Central to have a closer game because they've been breezing throughout this season, really since playing Eastside in week 2. If they can get that and start rounding into form, then they're going to be in better shape come a couple weeks from now. I think the next couple weeks for AC, other than, of course, winning, is preparing for Lutheran and what you're going to have to do there.
That's an interesting point because you take a look at guys that play, a lot of guys play both ways, but they never really have to play 4 quarters both ways, where they would likely have to. I mean, Zach Worm on the line, Keegan Bloom is such a big part of what they do, Ryan Black. I mean, there are guys, you're right, that play both sides of the football, but when you're only doing that for 2.5, 3 quarters, it's different than when you have somebody playing to your level of football and doing it on both sides of the football for 4 quarters. That is a good point. Leading up to this week's games, what are you most looking forward to about this coming Friday? Because I think the last couple of weeks have shown we have more teams alive in the postseason than I thought we were going to at this point at any point of the year. At the beginning of the year, I wasn't sure how many teams we'd have. Middle of the year, even, in week 9 when the regular season racked up, you start breaking down the brackets and thinking, okay, how many teams are we going to have alive this Friday, this Friday, this Friday? I think we got more teams on the docket than originally suspected. So what does that mean for Northeast Indiana football?
I think it means we have a great shot at some regional champions and multiple regional champions. And the crazy thing is we don't have Norwell. We penciled in Norwell as being maybe that second most likely team to get to the state championship after Adams Central. So we don't have that, but when you go through the schedule, Carroll, it's a winnable game. Snyder, it's a winnable game. Columbia City, Bluffton, and Lures, somebody's got to win that one, of course. And so you look at it and you say, man, everything's setting up nicely to have multiple teams down at the state championship, but these 50-50 games can go either way, and we know anything can happen after what we saw Yorktown do to Norwell last Friday. So it's the unpredictability of this point of the season. We assumed too much last week, and look what happened, especially in Ossian and also Bluffton and Eastbrook. So can this week beat last week? It's going to be tough, but we'll see what happens.
All right. He is Justin Kinney. I'm Glenn Moranian. We'll be back next Monday talking semi-state here on Inside the Zone.